It was one of those misty afternoons in Boston when the drizzle didn't soak your jacket but left the air heavy and cool. On a narrow side street, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner, sat Maple Ink Calf. Its chalkboard sign leaned a little crooked. Advertising, pumpkin spice latte, apple pie special. Ethan Carter stood outside for a beat, his hands deep in the pockets of his charcoal coat. A sleek black car idled at the curb, his driver patient and silent as always. Ethan could have gone back, headed to his penthouse or straight to the office, but something about the warm glow through the cafe's windows pulled him in. He pushed the door open. The bell above gave a bright little chime. Inside smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon. A low jazz tune drifted from the speakers. Wooden tables were scratched from years of use, and the shelves by the wall carried a scatter of books and ceramic mugs. The place felt worn, but in a way that wrapped around you like a sweater. "Hi there, welcome in," a voice said. Ethan looked up. Behind the counter stood a young woman with her hair tied in a loose ponytail, strands falling around her cheeks. Her apron had a faint coffee stain near the pocket. The name tag pinned to her chest read Emily. "What can I get for you?" she asked with a smile that wasn't forced, refreshingly different from the practiced ones he usually saw at fundraisers and galas. "Americano, hot, no sugar." "Got it. Have a seat anywhere you like." Ethan picked a table by the window. He hung his coat over the chair and let his phone buzz in his pocket. He knew without looking emails from board members, texts from his head of PR, maybe even a call from his lawyer. All things that could wait. A few minutes later, Emily set a steaming cup down in front of him. "Here you go. Let me know if you need hot water for a refill." "Thanks," Ethan said. As she turned, he caught himself speaking again. "Wait, do you still have apple pie?" She grinned. "One slice left. I'll warm it up." When she returned, she placed the plate and, almost as an afterthought, slid over a small shaker. "Try a pinch of cinnamon. Brings out the flavor." He noticed then a faint blue smudge of ink on her fingers. "You draw?" Emily blinked, then laughed a little, tucking her hand behind her. "I'm a design major. Spent half the morning sketching packaging concepts. The ink doesn't really wash off that easy. Design, huh?" Ethan raised a brow. "That's a lot more creative than what I do. What do you do?" He paused for the briefest second before answering, careful to keep it simple. "Analyst, finance, small firm." Sounds intense. It can be. But sometimes... Ethan glanced at the window streaked with rain. "Sometimes it's just numbers on a page." Emily tilted her head. "Still, at least you get to sit inside instead of hauling coffee cups around." She said it lightly, not bitter, just matter, dash of fact. Ethan smiled. "Fair point." The cafe stayed quiet for most of the hour. A middle-aged man read the Globe in the corner. Two college kids debated which indie band first used the banjo in their songs. Emily wiped tables, refilled sugar jars, and occasionally hummed under her breath. Ethan let himself watch her in those in-between moments. The way she leaned on one hip while scribbling notes in a beat-up notebook. Or how her smile widened when she helped a customer carry drinks to the door. His phone buzzed again. This time he glanced. A message from Claire, his PR director. Media's pushing for confirmation. "Will you attend Friday's gala? Need photo assets." Another from Edward, his head of investments. "Rumors about the merger are circulating. Board wants an emergency meeting." He locked the screen and flipped the phone face down. Not here, not now. Hey, Ethan, right? He looked up. Emily had wandered over, balancing a towel on her shoulder. Yeah, can I ask you something? She held up her notebook, covered in sketches of boxes and bottles. This is for class. I'm trying to design eco-friendly packaging, recycled paper, plant-based ink, biodegradable glue. Problem is, the lid's a little awkward. Do you think people would put up with a minor inconvenience if it meant saving the planet? Ethan studied the rough lines. He'd sat through endless PowerPoints on sustainability initiatives at Carter Group. But this was different, tangible, human. If you tell them why it matters, he said slowly, and make it simple enough, they'll try. Maybe add a small note right on the lid, or an icon. Don't just say sustainable, show them what you did and why. Her eyes lit up. She scribbled a reminder beside the drawing. That's actually really good advice. Thanks, he chuckled. Don't give me too much credit. I'm used to throwing around big words in meetings. This is more grounded. Grounded is good. She smiled. Most people don't care about the buzzwords. They care if something feels real. Ethan met her gaze. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt like someone saw past the polished exterior he wore every day. By closing time, the drizzle had eased. Emily tidied up, stacking chairs on tables. Ethan brought his empty cup to the counter. You're heading out? She asked. Yeah, thanks for the pie. Anytime. She rang up his bill, then slid the receipt across with a pen. Sign here. Ethan scrawled his name. She glanced at it, then tucked the slip away. He started to turn, but she reached under the counter and handed him a small scrap of paper. Here, if you want to read something good. I'll bring this book tomorrow, in quick handwriting. The design of everyday things, I can lend it. He folded the note into his palm, surprised at how much it mattered. See you tomorrow, she asked. Maybe, Ethan said, though he already knew the answer. The bell chimed again as he stepped out. His driver flicked on the headlights, ready to open the back door, but Ethan shook his head and began walking instead. The night smelled of wet pavement and leaves. The scrap of paper was warm in his fist. For once, he didn't feel like Ethan Carter, billionaire, heir, and CEO out here. He was just Ethan, a man with ink stains on his mind, cinnamon on his tongue, and the sudden, startling hope of tomorrow. The next morning, Ethan showed up at Maple and Ink earlier than the day before. The sun hadn't fully burned through the Boston fog, and the cafe windows were still cloudy with condensation. Inside, Emily was wiping down tables, her hair tied in the same loose ponytail. She looked up, a little surprised. When the bell above the door chimed, "You're back. I told you I might be," Ethan said. Settling into the same window seat, Emily grabbed a menu but smirked. "Americano. No sugar." Exactly. She brought the cup over in minutes, steam curling up into the cool morning air. "You're officially a regular now," Ethan chuckled. Guess so. In the days that followed, he kept coming back. Sometimes in the morning before the office, sometimes late in the evening when the place was quiet. The staff started to nod at him with recognition, and Emily stopped bothering with the menu. Their conversations stretched little by little. At first it was simple, whether books on the cafe shelf, which pastries were worth the calories. But soon Emily began to share more. One night, after the last customer left, She sat down across from him with a steaming mug of tea. You ever feel like life's a treadmill? You run, and you're still in the same place. Ethan lifted his gaze from the rim of his cup. All the time. She gave a small laugh. I work here 4 nights a week, sometimes double shifts. Then I go to class during the day. By the end of the week, I'm broke, tired, and still behind on projects. I just keep telling myself one day, I'll design something that matters. Packaging logos, maybe even a brand of my own. Her voice wasn't bitter, just honest. Ethan listened, struck by the quiet determination underneath. What about you? She asked suddenly. What do you want out of life? Ethan hesitated. He could have said, running a multinational corporation, handling billions in assets, keeping shareholders happy. Instead, he said the truth he rarely allowed himself. I want to breathe without worrying who's watching. To feel normal. Emily tilted her head, considering him. That doesn't sound so hard. You'd be surprised. On another evening, they walked through Boston Common after she closed up shop. The park lights cast long shadows across the pathways, and the trees were shedding the last of their autumn leaves. Emily pointed out the statues, the carousel closed for the season, the fountain with coins at the bottom. When I was little, she said, my mum brought me here every Sunday. We didn't have much, but she'd let me toss a penny in the fountain and make a wish. Did it work? Ethan asked. She smiled faintly. Depends how you look at it. I wished to get into art school. And here I am, juggling school and 3 jobs. But still, Ethan wanted to say he could pay her tuition 10 times over without blinking. But he stayed quiet. Something told him that offering money would break the fragile honesty between them. Instead, he asked, what do you wish for now? Emily paused, looking up at the night sky. To finish what I started. To stand on my own 2 feet. To know I didn't need anyone to carry me. Ethan nodded, though the words stung. She didn't know she was already carrying him away from the gilded cage he lived in. Back at the cafe one rainy evening, Emily slid her sketchbook across the table. Be honest, does this look dumb? The page was filled with mock-ups for a line of reusable coffee cups. Bright colors, simple fonts, small icons showing how to wash and reuse. It doesn't look dumb, Ethan said. It looks smart. People want simple instructions, something that feels approachable. You've got that here. Her face lit up, and she scribbled notes along the margin. You have a good eye. You sure you don't work in design? Ethan laughed softly. Trust me, I don't. But he couldn't deny how much he enjoyed these conversations about things that didn't involve profit, margins, or hostile takeovers. As the weeks rolled on, Ethan realized he was looking forward to these visits more than anything else in his calendar. He found excuses to clear time in the evenings, pushing meetings earlier, ignoring invitations to fundraisers. At Maple and Ink, he wasn't Ethan Carter, billionaire heir. He was just Ethan, the guy who ordered the same coffee, listened to Emily talk about deadlines, and teased her for being obsessed with cinnamon rolls. One night, she caught him staring. What? She asked, eyebrow arched. Nothing, just. You make this place feel lighter. Emily laughed. It's the fairy lights and pumpkin spice, not me. But Ethan shook his head. No, it's you. For a second, she looked caught off guard, then smiled faintly and ducked her gaze back to her sketchbook. Those days were simple, but they were the happiest Ethan had felt in years. He didn't have to strategize every word, didn't have to wonder if someone wanted something from him. Here, in this little cafe with ink stains on Emily's hands and the hum of jazz in the background. He felt free, and though neither of them said it aloud, something was beginning to grow between the cups of coffee and late-night walks, fragile thread of connection, spun from honesty, laughter, and the dangerous possibility of more. For a while, life settled into a rhythm. Ethan stopped counting the days. He only measured time by how many coffees he'd shared with Emily, how many sketches she had shown him, and how many nights they had wandered the quiet streets after closing. But a small one, has a way of creeping back. It started on a Tuesday evening. The cafe was busier than usual, filled with college students cramming for mid. Ethan had finished his Americano and was slipping on his coat when his phone buzzed. Normally, he ignored it, but this time the name flashing on the screen froze him bored chair. He answered quickly, lowering his voice. "Yeah," the chair's voice boomed through anyway. "We need you tomorrow. Investor confidence is shaky. If we don't finalize this acquisition, the market will smell blood." "I told you." Ethan glanced up. Emily was heading over with a tray, catching only the tail end of his words. He turned away. "I'll handle it. Tomorrow morning. Don't call me here." He ended the call, shoving the phone into his pocket. When he looked back, Emily's brow was furrowed, just slightly. "Big meeting?" she asked. "Nothing important," he lied smoothly. "Just a co-worker who can't solve their own problems." She didn't press, but the crease between her eyebrows lingered. 2 nights later, the lie cracked a little more. Ethan had offered to walk Emily home after closing. The air was sharp with winter, their breaths puffing white in the streetlights. Halfway down the block, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. The tinted window rolled down just enough for the driver to lean out. "Mr. Carter." Sir Ethan stepped forward quickly, shutting the window with a curt motion. "Not tonight. Wait around the corner." The car rolled off silently, leaving behind a swirl of exhaust. Emily blinked. "Mr. Carter." Ethan forced a chuckle. "It's a dumb nickname at work. My last name. They liked to tease me." Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more. The next weekend, Maple and Ink hosted an open mic night. Students read poetry, a local guitarist strummed folk songs, and Emily convinced Ethan to stay and listen. He sat near the back, sipping his coffee, actually enjoying the raw honesty of it all. Then his phone buzzed again. He glanced down Forbes, requesting a comment about the rumored merger. His chest tightened. Emily leaned over. "You always get so many calls. For a small firm analyst, you're more popular than the president." Ethan smirked, masking his unease. "Finance people panic over everything. It's boring, trust me." But Emily's gaze lingered on him, searching. Doubt bloomed slowly in her. She noticed details, the way his watch gleamed, clearly a model worth more than her tuition. The cut of his coats, subtle but expensive. The way he never flinched at the cafe's card machine, no matter how high the total dot. And then, one late afternoon, she caught him stepping out of a car parked near the cafe. The car wasn't just sleek, it was unmistakably a luxury vehicle, the kind of car only executives or celebrities drove. Ethan had slipped out quickly, tugged his scarf high, and hurried into the cafe like nothing had happened. Emily watched from the counter, a tray of mugs in her hand. Her chest tightened. When she brought over his Americano, she tried to keep her tone even. "Nice ride." Ethan froze for half a second, then forced a shrug. "Not mine, I just hitched a ride with a client." She nodded, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. That night, after she closed up, Emily sat in the empty cafe, flipping through her sketchbook but not drawing a thing. Questions looped in her head. Who was Ethan, really? An analyst scraping by at some small firm, or someone playing a part? She thought about the way he avoided talking about his job, the expensive watch, the driver calling him Mr. Carter. It didn't add up, and yet he listened. He remembered the little details she told him, the penny wishes in Boston Common, her mum working double shifts, the way she liked cinnamon on her pie. He wasn't cold or arrogant or careless. He looked at her like she mattered, still. Secrets had a way of poisoning everything. The next day, Emily decided to test him. So, Mr. Analyst, she said lightly while wiping down his table, what's the name of this tiny firm you work for? Maybe I'll look it up, see if they're hiring. God knows I could use better pay than tips. Ethan's pulse jumped. He forced a casual smile. It's boring. No one's ever heard of it. Emily tilted her head. Try me. He opened his mouth, then shut it. Honestly, you'd fall asleep halfway through the job description. Stick to design, you're better at it. She set the rag down, meeting his eyes. You know, Ethan, sometimes honesty isn't about the details. It's about showing up real. Even if it's boring. The words hit harder than she meant them to. He nodded, silent, as she walked back to the counter. Emily's chest ached. She wasn't sure if she was falling for a man who wanted to be ordinary or being fooled by someone who was anything but, and Ethan, watching her retreat, felt the first true crack of fear, the fear of losing the only person who'd ever looked at him without seeing dollar signs. The cafe felt quieter after that night of uneasy questions. Emily still served Ethan his usual Americano, still laughed at his dry jokes, but something had shifted. Doubt hung in the air like fog. Ethan sensed it too. He wanted to tell her the truth, to strip away the layers of pretense, but every time he opened his mouth, fear silenced him. What if she walked away for good? He told himself he'd wait. Just a little longer. The opportunity came in the most unexpected way. Maple and Ink had been hired to cater a high-profile event downtown. The manager was thrilled. Was exposure the cafe desperately needed? Emily, still juggling classes, agreed to pick up extra shifts that weekend. It's just handing out hors d'oeuvres and champagne, she told herself. Easy money. The venue was the Park Plaza Hotel, its ballroom decked out in chandeliers and velvet drapes. Waiters in black and white bustled around, balancing trays. Emily adjusted the collar of her crisp uniform shirt, clutching a tray of canapes. She was nervous. Not because of the crowd, Boston's wealthy elite in glittering gowns and tailored suits, but because the place felt so far from her world. Every conversation hummed with talk of markets, partnerships, philanthropy. She floated through it like an outsider, until she saw him. Ethan Carter stood near the stage, a glass of scotch in hand, talking easily with a cluster of executives. His tailored navy suit fit him perfectly, his watch gleamed under the chandelier light. People leaned toward him when he spoke, laughing at his remarks, nodding at his opinions. Emily's breath caught. For a moment, she thought she must be mistaken. But then he turned, and she saw his face, calm, confident, utterly at home in this gilded world. A man not hiding at all. Her tray trembled in her hands. She barely managed to set it down on a passing cart before bolting toward the service corridor. Her chest tight, He was one of them, not an ordinary analyst. Not some guy trying to get by. A man with a driver, a board chair, a ballroom full of people hanging on his every word. A billionaire. And he had lied. She didn't mean to run into him. But fate or bad timing had other plans. When she came back out, trying to finish her shift with her chin high, Ethan spotted her across the room. His smile faltered. He excused himself from the group and strode toward her. Emily, his voice was low, urgent, as if the walls themselves might overhear. Her throat tightened. So it's true. He swallowed hard. I can explain. You told me you worked for a small firm, she said, keeping her voice steady, though her hands trembled. You made me believe you were normal, like me. Because I wanted to be, Ethan admitted. With you, she shook her head, cutting him off. You lied. Every time I asked, you chose a lie over the truth. A few nearby guests glanced their way, curious. Ethan reached out, but she stepped back, nearly colliding with a waiter. Her eyes stung, though she refused to let the tears fall here. In this world of polished shoes and crystal glasses, I was stupid, she whispered. Stupid for thinking you came into that cafe for the coffee. It wasn't the coffee, he said quickly. His voice cracked with desperation. It was you. Always you. But Emily had already turned, weaving through the crowd. Pushing through the doors into the cold night air. She walked fast, heels clicking on the sidewalk, the winter wind cutting at her cheeks. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Away from the glitter, away from the man who had made her believe in something simple and real. Behind her, Ethan burst out of the hotel doors, calling her name. Emily, wait please. She spun, her breath clouding in the frosty air. Don't you dare follow me. He froze, helpless, watching as she disappeared into the city lights. Back inside, the party carried on, oblivious. Executives raised glasses, journalists scribbled notes, deals whispered into champagne. Ethan stood in the empty doorway, his chest hollow. For the first time in his life, he didn't care about the empire built on his name. He only cared about the woman who had just walked away. Emily didn't go back to Maple and Ink right away. For the first time in months, she avoided the little cafe that had felt like a second home. Every time she thought of Ethan sitting at his usual window seat, she felt her chest twist. She couldn't face him. Not now. Her phone buzzed constantly. Friends from school sent texts. Was that you in the papers? Emily, is this real? Screenshots poured in headlines, splashed across gossip blogs and financial pages alike. Mystery woman spotted with billionaire. Heir, Ethan Carter, calf girl, captures CEO's ATTON. Her face, grainy but recognizable, stared back at her from photos she never knew had been taken. Walking beside him on the street, laughing with him outside the cafe, even handing him coffee through the counter. What had been private suddenly wasn't. Meanwhile, Ethan tried everything to reach her. He called, left voicemails, even showed up at the cafe on the off chance she might be working. Nothing. Each day without her felt heavier. In boardrooms, his advisors spoke of numbers and strategy, but his mind wandered. He saw her expression at the gala hurt, betrayed, and it hollowed him out. Sir, the press frenzy is damaging our image, Claire, his PR director, said one morning, dropping a stack of clippings onto the mahogany table. You need to control the narrative. Distance yourself from this girl. Deny if you have to. Ethan's jaw tightened. Her name is Emily. Emily, Claire repeated carefully, is making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Do you want to risk investor confidence for a college student who serves coffee? The room fell silent. Ethan stood, pushing the papers aside. This meeting's over. Emily tried to bury herself in schoolwork, in long shifts at the cafe. But whispers followed her. Customers leaned in, asking if she was that girl. Classmates exchanged glances when she walked into lectures. She hated the attention. More than that, she hated feeling like a joke. One night, after closing, she sat alone at a corner table, staring at her sketchbook. The lines on the page blurred with the tears she refused to let fall. Had he ever seen her as more than a distraction? A novelty? Did he laugh with his wealthy friends about the girl who thought he was an ordinary analyst? She wanted to believe his words that the Gallet was always Ubert. The lie of his hidden identity echoed louder, Ethan. On the other hand, was unraveling. The Carter Group's board pressed harder. This scandal is reckless, one director snapped. Our stock has dipped 4 points since those photos circulated. Investors need reassurance. End it, another insisted. Publicly, clean break. Ethan stared at the long conference table, the men in suits who had known him since childhood. They looked at him not as a man, but as an asset. For once, he didn't argue. He simply stood, leaving the meeting mid-sentence, ignoring their shouts. Days passed. The distance between them grew into an ache. Emily stopped checking her phone. She couldn't bear to hear his voice on yet another voicemail. Please, just talk to me. 5 minutes, anywhere. She told herself she was doing the right thing. That cutting him out was self-preservation. That she didn't belong in his world of wealth and scrutiny. But in the quiet moments walking home from class, sketching alone at her desk, memories slipped in. Ethan listening to her penny wishes at Boston Common. Ethan scribbling notes in the margin of her designs. Ethan laughing, truly laughing, over a cookie she'd given him for free. She pressed the heel of her hand to her chest, as if she could shove those memories away. One evening, after another exhausting day, Emily flipped on the TV. She hadn't meant to, but the news channel was running a segment on Carter Group. The anchor's voice was smooth, detached. Rumors continued to swirl around CEO Ethan Carter, whose recent appearances with a mystery woman have sparked controversy. While some insiders suggest this is a temporary distraction, others worry about his judgment as the company faces a critical merger. A panelist chimed in. He's letting his personal life interfere with business. That girl, whoever she is, isn't worth the billions at stake. Emily's stomach dropped. They didn't even know her name, but they'd already decided she was a liability. She snapped off the TV, the screen going dark. For the first time, she wondered if walking away wasn't just her choice. Sit was the only choice she had. Across the city, Ethan stood on his balcony, the Boston skyline glittering below. He'd built walls his whole life against opportunists, sycophants, anyone who wanted a piece of his fortune. Emily had been the first person to slip past those walls, and now, because of his own lies, she was gone. His phone buzzed again. Another headline alert. Another plea from his board. Another reminder that the empire he was born to protect was shaking. Ethan gripped the railing until his knuckles whitened. If loving Emily meant risking everything, was he willing to lose it all? He didn't have the answer yet, but he knew one thing. The distance between them was tearing him apart. The storm hit fast. By Monday morning, Carter Group's stock had slipped another 3%. Headlines screamed in every direction. Carter Group stumbles amid CEO's romantic distraction. Wall Street questions Ethan Carter's focus. Who is the girl risking $1 billion merger? For Ethan, it was more than numbers on a screen. It was blood in the water. Rivals circled, waiting for his first misstep at a board meeting. The directors didn't hold back. "This is untenable," barked Mr. Wilcox, a silver-haired titan who had known Ethan since he was a boy. "Investors are losing confidence. The merger is fragile as it is, and now they're questioning your leadership. This girl, Lemily Parker, is it? She's become a liability," another snapped. "You need to end this publicly. Issue a statement. Apologize. Distance yourself." Ethan sat at the head of the table, expression unreadable. But inside, his chest burned. They don't know her. They don't even know her name. And they've already reduced her to a problem to be solved. Claire, his PR director, leaned in gently. "Ethan, I know you care about her. But the truth is, right now, she's costing you billions. One decision could stabilize everything." Silence. All eyes were on him. Finally, Ethan spoke. "If you think my entire worth comes down to one woman, then maybe you've all overestimated me." Gasps rippled down the table. But before anyone could answer, he stood and walked out. Meanwhile, Emily was unraveling in her own way. Her phone wouldn't stop, buzzing, journalists calling, tabloids fishing for quotes. Paparazzi had even followed her from campus one afternoon, cameras flashing until she ducked into the subway. Her boss at Maple and Ink pulled her aside. "Emily, I hate to do this, but customers are complaining. Reporters are camping outside. We're losing business." Emily's stomach dropped. "Are you firing me?" The manager sighed. "Just take a break until things cooled down." Humiliation burned through her. She had never asked for this, never wanted to be anyone's headline. She just wanted to finish school, to design, to live quietly. Now she was unemployed, exposed, and utterly alone. That night, she sat on her tiny apartment floor surrounded by unopened sketchbooks. Her mum called, worried, but Emily brushed it off, pretending she was fine. When she hung up, the silence pressed in. She whispered to herself, "I shouldn't have mattered that much. I shouldn't have been anyone's weakness." Ethan wasn't spared either. A rival executive, Marcus Hale of Hale Capital, seized the moment. He fed rumors to the press, hinting that Ethan was unstable, distracted, reckless. "The Carter boy is blinded by some waitress," Marcus sneered during a TV interview. "If he can't separate business from personal life, maybe he isn't fit to lead." The word spread like wildfire. The merger Ethan had fought months for wobbled on the edge of collapse. Partners pulled back. Analysts predicted disaster. Everywhere he turned, Ethan heard the same message: choose the company or lose everything. Late one night, Ethan stood in his office, staring out at the Boston skyline. Papers cluttered his desk, merger contracts, financial reports, PR drafts. He pushed them aside. Exhausted Claire appeared in the doorway, her voice soft. "You can still fix this. One press conference, one statement ending it, and the board will back off." Ethan turned slowly. "You want me to betray the only person who's ever seen me as human. I want you to protect the thousands of employees depending on you," she replied gently. "Sometimes sacrifice is necessary." Sacrifice? The word clawed at him. For years, he had sacrificed his freedom, his privacy, his choices all for the Carter legacy. And now they wanted him to sacrifice Emily too. He closed his eyes, remembering her laugh at the park, her earnest sketches, the way she looked at him before she knew who he was. If he lost her, what would all this power mean? Across town, Emily sat on her bed, scrolling through her phone. She stumbled across Marcus Hale's interview, his smug face declaring her a distraction. She threw the phone aside, tears hot in her eyes. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'm the reason Ethan's falling apart, for the first time. Emily wondered if walking away, completely disappearing, was the only way to save him. The city slept, but both of them lay awake in their separate worlds. Ethan, with the weight of a billion-dollar empire pressing down on his shoulders. Emily, with the crushing belief that she was his downfall, and somewhere in the middle, a choice loomed: love or legacy, truth or survival. The test had arrived, and neither knew if they were strong enough to pass it. The press conference had been scheduled for weeks, meant to reassure investors about the pending merger. But in the days leading up to it, the narrative had shifted. No one wanted to hear about financial projections or growth strategies. They wanted one thing: answers about the girl by the time Ethan stepped onto the stage at the Carter Group headquarters. The room was packed. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Lights flared. Microphones stretched toward him. The air buzzed with anticipation, hungry for scandal. He stood at the podium, jaw tight, papers neatly stacked in front of him. He didn't look at the notes. Instead, he looked straight into the crowd. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady. "I know why you're here, and I won't waste your time." A ripple of surprise passed through the reporters. This wasn't the canned speech they expected. "For months, I've been living a lie," Ethan continued. "Not with my company, but with myself. I hid who I was from someone who deserved honesty. I told myself it was to protect what little normalcy I had left. The truth is, I was afraid of being used, of being seen only for my last name." He took a breath, his chest tightened. But he didn't falter. "And then I met Emily Parker." The room erupted, shutters flashing, reporters shouting questions. Ethan raised a hand. "Emily is the first person who looked at me and didn't see a CEO or a billionaire. She saw me as a man. For the first time, I wasn't Carter Group's heir. I was just Ethan, and I wanted to hold on to that so badly that I lied to her about who I was." He paused, letting the weight of the confession settle. "Yes, that was a mistake. A coward's mistake. But I will not make another. I will not apologize for loving her. I will not let a boardroom or a headline dictate who I can or cannot care about." The room went still for a beat. Then the chaos returned, questions firing, hands waving. "Mr. Carter, are you saying you're choosing this woman over your company? Do you understand the financial implications of this? Is this a resignation announcement?" Ethan leaned closer to the microphone. His voice dropped, but carried with a raw clarity. "I am saying that without Emily, everything I've built means nothing. If protecting my company requires me to abandon her, then I've misunderstood what leadership truly is. Because leadership without truth isn't leadership, it's fear across town." Emily sat frozen in her tiny apartment, eyes glued to the television. She hadn't planned to watch, but curiosity got the better of her when she saw Ethan standing there, declaring her name in front of the world. Her heart stuttered. She expected denial, distance, some rehearsed statement to sweep her under the rug. Instead, He was fighting. For her, her throat tightened. For weeks she had felt like a burden, like the cause of his downfall. But the man on the screen didn't look broken. He looked free, and he was risking everything to say it. The fallout was immediate. Reporters stormed out of the building to file breaking news. The stock market trembled. Analysts debated whether Ethan's boldness was reckless or refreshing. Board members fumed. But for Ethan, none of that mattered in that moment. When he stepped off the stage, Claire caught his arm. "You've just set fire to your career," she whispered harshly. "Then let it burn," Ethan replied, and kept walking. That evening, Emily's phone buzzed. A simple message from Ethan. "I'm sorry. Not for loving you, but for hiding. I'll be at Maple and Ink tomorrow morning. If you don't come, I'll understand." Emily stared at the screen, her pulse racing. She should ignore it, protect herself, move on, but in her chest, something shifted. The image of him standing under the weight of 1,000 flashing cameras, saying her name not as a liability, not as a mistake, but as his truth played over and over. For the first time since the gala, she let herself believe he might actually mean it. That night, neither of them slept. Ethan lay awake, wondering if he had just lost his empire for nothing. Emily sat by her window, staring at the city lights, wondering if tomorrow she could take the first step back toward him, both terrified, both hopeful, and both knowing the next morning would change everything. Morning light spilled over Boston, painting the city in pale gold. Maple and Ink was just opening when Ethan pushed through the door. The bell jingled, the same as it had on the very first day. The cafe was almost empty. The smell of coffee beans hung warm in the air. Ethan chose his usual seat by the window, but his hands wouldn't stop trembling. Every few seconds, he glanced at the door. Would she come? He had risked everything: his reputation, his company, the car to Naaman, a hope that Emily still cared. And hope, he knew, was fragile. He ordered an Americano, but barely touched it. The minutes stretched. He checked his watch, then scolded himself for checking, and then the bell rang. Emily stepped inside, hair loose around her shoulders, a scarf wrapped tight against the winter chill. Her eyes found his instantly. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she walked over. "Hi," she said, softly. "Hi," his voice cracked. She slid into the seat across from him. Neither reached for the coffee between them. "I watched," she said finally. "The press conference." Ethan nodded. "I meant every word." Her eyes searched his face. "Why? You could have denied everything. You could have protected yourself, your company. Why risk it all for me?" "Because, without you, it's all noise," Ethan said simply. "Money, power, headlines, they don't mean anything if I'm living a lie. You're the only thing that's ever felt real." Her throat tightened. For weeks, she'd told herself he was dangerous, that his world would crush her, and maybe it still would. But the man across from her wasn't the polished billionaire from the gala. He was the man who argued about cinnamon on pie, who stayed up late to look at her sketches, who walked with her through the park like he had nowhere else to be. "I don't know if I can do this," Emily whispered. "Your life? It's not mine. It's headlines and boardrooms and strangers taking pictures of me on the street. I don't know if I can promise it'll ever be easy," Ethan admitted. "But I can promise I'll stand by you. No more lies." For a long time, silence stretched between them, filled only with the hum of the espresso machine and the faint jazz drifting from the speakers. Finally, Emily reached across the table. Her hand brushed his. "I don't know what the future looks like, but I'm willing to try. With you," Ethan exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. He wrapped his fingers around hers, grounding himself in the warmth of her touch. Later that night, after the cafe closed, they walked together down a quiet Boston street. Snow flurries dusted the sidewalks. Street lamps cast halos of light onto the pavement. For once, there were no cameras, no board members, no reporters shouting questions. Just the two of them, hand in hand. Emily leaned into him. "So, what now?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Now, we figure it out. One day at a time." She squeezed his hand tighter. One day at a time sounds good. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring: scandal, backlash, maybe even loss. But for the first time, both of them felt certain about one thing. Whatever storms came, they would face them together. The city stretched ahead, loud and endless, but in that quiet corner, it was just two people walking side by side, and for the first time, there were no masks, no lies, just Ethan and Emily. 3 years later, Boston in spring was alive with color. The trees in the common were budding green again, street vendors sold hot dogs by the park, and the air carried the promise of change. Emily Parker adjusted her tote bag on her shoulder as she walked into a small studio space on Tremont Street. The sign above the door read Parker Design Studio. The place smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee. On the walls hung mock-ups of sustainable packaging, clean, modern designs printed on recycled paper. 3 years ago, she never would have believed she'd have a studio of her own. She had poured herself into her degree, late nights sketching and early mornings revising prototypes. Ethan had been there through it all, quietly supportive but never overbearing. He came to critiques, helped run numbers for her proposals, and most importantly, reminded her that her voice mattered. The studio wasn't huge. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. A bell rang as the door opened. Ethan stepped inside, carrying 2 coffees. His suit jacket was slung casually over one arm, his tie loosened. He was still CEO of Carter Group, but something about him had softened. "Morning, boss," he teased, handing her a cup. Emily smiled. "Thanks, you're late. I had a board call," he said, rolling his eyes. "Marcus Hale tried to talk over me again. I told him to mute himself." Emily laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible, and you love it." She did. After the scandal 3 years ago, life hadn't magically become easier. The press frenzy eventually died down, but whispers lingered. Some investors left. Ethan faced years of rebuilding his credibility, balancing bold business moves with transparency. He'd earned back respect, not by hiding, but by proving that honesty wasn't weakness. And Emily, she had struggled too. At first, she questioned every step whether people saw her as herself or just as his girlfriend. But over time, she carved her own path, letting her work speak louder than her connection to Ethan. Clients came for her talent and stayed because she delivered. They had grown stronger, not despite the storms, but because of them. That afternoon, Ethan leaned against her desk while Emily showed him a new design compostable coffee cups for a chain expanding across New England. "I like it," Ethan said, tracing the minimalist logo. "Simple, clever, feels like you." Emily rolled her eyes. "You say that about everything I make, because everything you make feels like you." He grinned. She swatted at him playfully. But inside, her chest warmed. Later that evening, they walked together through Boston Common, just as they had years ago. The park was dotted with kids flying kites, couples sprawled on blankets, street musicians playing jazz. Emily stopped by the fountain where she'd once told him about her penny wishes. She dug in her pocket and pulled out a coin. "Another wish?" Ethan asked. "Why not?" She tossed it into the water, watching the ripples spread. "What did you wish for?" She smirked. "If I tell you, it won't come true." He slipped an arm around her shoulders. "You already have everything you wished for." She leaned against him, thinking of her studio, of his steady hand in hers, of the fact that they were still here, still choosing each other, day after day. "Maybe," she admitted softly, "but there's always room for one more dream." As dusk settled, the city lights blinked on. Ethan and Emily walked home side by side, the same way they had the night she first decided to give him another chance. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. There would always be headlines, board meetings, deadlines, and doubts. But there would also always be cinnamon pie, Americano coffees, late-night sketches, and quiet walks in the park. 3 years later, the world still tested them, but together they had learned that love wasn't about escaping storms. It was about holding hands through the rain, and in that simple truth they had found their forever.